Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome back to our best chess games of all time series. So in this series we're following the best of the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history, and today I wanted to show a really immortal chess game that was played in 1995 between Roberto Cifuentes Parada against Vadim Zvjaginsev. Vadim Zvjaginsev, really an interesting chess player. He was part of the 1997 Russian national chess team that won the national chess championship in that year. He's a great attacker, he's a sharp player. Maybe he's not one of the popular Russian grandmasters, but still this guy can play. I've introduced you many times on my YouTube chess channel this old Russian grandmasters, and these guys can really play if you get into their attacking opportunities, if you get into their lines, if you get maybe in their opening preparations, you get crushed for sure. I'm sure that if this guy, for instance, has his day, then he could even crush the world champion Magnus Carlsen, because that's simply how they play this game. If you grew up, of course, with some great stories about Mikhail Tal, Garry Kasparov, and Anatoly Karpov, then of course you're trying also to play like that. So I think this Russian grandmaster around 2600 are simply great. Their games are really sharp with some great tactics, of course. So let's check out now the game here. Roberto Cifuentes Parada played with the white pieces and Vadim Zvjaginsev with the black pieces. Parada opened here with the move d4. We have e6 by Zvjaginsev. We have knight to f3, the Horvitz defense, d5, c4, knight to f6, knight to c3, and after c6 the game basically transposed into the Semislav defense. The Semislav is of course a firm opening. You see first Zvjaginsev played a natural healthy opening, but then the game will become really tactical. In the game we have e3. There are also some opportunities to play c takes d5. For instance, when I play the same against the Semislav, I like to simply undermine the pressure with c takes d5. Here in the game e3, what white is doing always in the Semislav defense is delay the situation a little bit. Here we're waiting black to take d takes c4, so we're playing around this move a little bit. We're trying some moves, queen to c2, maybe bishop to d2. We're delaying, and then when black takes, we're simply taking out the pawn. What black is trying to do is, now in the opening stage at least, is wait white to play the move bishop to d3, and then maybe to get some tempi with d takes c4 followed with b5. So in the game, knight to d7 played by Parada. We have queen to c2, so we have again this delaying move, b6, bishop to e2, and now bishop to b7. Also an opportunity was of course d takes c4 followed with b5, but you have already played with your b pawn, so that's why here Zvjaginsev played simply a different line. After the move bishop to b7, we're threatening now positionally to go here after potential c5 move, also to occupy the weak e4 square with our knight. So in the game, castling bishop to e7, rook to d1. So here Parada gets of course the rook on the same file like the queen. If something gets cleared in the center, then the queen could be in danger. So castling also by Zvjaginsev. We have e4, which is of course a natural idea. We want to create spaces here in the center. So black played a little bit the passive line here with the move b6, c6. So that's why here Parada played an interesting idea. It's a pragmatic idea. I think it's nothing wrong with this move, e4. In the game, Zvjaginsev took of course d takes e4, knight to e4, and now queen to c7. Here Zvjaginsev again delay situation a little bit, and here comes already the first mistake by Parada, and the best suggested line. And you see now how sometimes in chess you can really break these basic principles in chess. So here knight to f6 is perfectly fine. After something like knight to f6, we could go c5. The main goal of this particular line is to play simply against this bad bishop on b7, because black played passively, as we said, with this move b6, c6, and so that's why this idea to block a little bit the activity of the light blue bishop is perfectly fine. Then we could occupy also the e5 square. But in the game, instead of this knight to f6, Parada played knight to c3, and it's really unnecessary, this move. First we played knight to e4, then we retreated to c3. So as I said, I simply don't like this move, and here in the game Zvjaginsev immediately positionally punishes this move with the move c5. And what you do if you play d takes c5, then knight to c5 or bishop to c5 or queen to c5 will happen. Then you have some trouble on the c file. What Parada tried here to do is to create a very annoying pass pawn with the move d5. But now after e takes d5, c takes d5, we have reached now a position where black has this isolated pardon me, white has this isolated pawn, of course, and it's of course a natural idea to create pass pawns, but not in this such early stage of the game, because this pass pawn can be really blocked. And one of the best ways to play against the pass pawn, against an isolated pawn here like this, is simply to create a blockade with bishop to d6. And I'm not seeing good ways how white should make progress here, because the problem is now black will create now a pawn majority attack with a6 b5. We'll play simply now this 3 versus 2 situation. So I think when it comes to pawn structures, black is much better. And you see now the problems because of this move knight to c3, retreating move, and here this creating this isolated pawn situation. Black from this point on has really a comfortable game. And here a6, you see Zvjaginsev prepares simply his queenside attack with the pawn majority, 3 versus 2. As we said, a6 b5 is now a serious threat. One of the best ways is simply to play here the move a4, and this a4 is at least blocking the queenside for a while. I think in the future black could find good ways to break the position with the move b5, but this move has to be at least prepared. You need, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 tempi in order to make a b5 move. So at least with this move a4, we're blocking the potential progress of blacks. And again, here Parada played knight to h4. He didn't compete here on the queen side. He allowed basically here Zvjaginsev to play the move b5 himself. Here g6, first of all, cutting off here this very important square for the knight. So if the knight comes on f5, then the position is really dangerous for black. So very good move here by Zvjaginsev. And we have now bishop to h6. Nothing special with this move. Basically, okay, we have a tempo against the rook, but basically you're improving your opponent's rook's position. Rook to e8, and now the rook comes basically into the game. So nothing special with this move bishop to h6. Again, this better idea is simply to play a4. You have to block the queen side. As I said, you will probably lose in one particular moment the battle on the queen side, but at least you can prolong the game a little bit on the queen side with the move a4. After move bishop to h6 here, rook to e8 was played, queen to d2 by Parada, and now bishop to d6. So you see, it's a natural idea. We're playing against an isolated pawn. The best way to play against an isolated pawn is to create a blockade. But the great part about this blockade is not that this is only a blockade. This is also a great attack against the square h2. So with this blockade idea by black, Zvjaginsev created here a nice counter attack against this weak square on h2. So it forces now also Parada to weaken the pawn structure a little bit with the move g3. We have now b5. You see now black gets its goal. Black has now opportunities to push away further the minor pieces of white, has also still this very important diagonal. So basically black is playing now on both sides, and black is already much better here when it comes to the evolution. Of course, positionally white is basically bad here. So bishop to f3, we have now b4, knight to e2, and knight to a4 maybe slightly better. At least we're competing somehow. In the continuation, queen to a5 could happen. And now after b3, c4 would be the suggested line. Now knight to b2. It seems so that the fork on c3 is working, but now knight to c4. After queen to c5, we can now escape with the queen. And the good part about this particular line is that at least we have blocked a little bit the progress of blacks. At least we have blocked the pawn storm that black has built here. So now, okay, still black has this supported pass pawn, but again, we could now also from white perspective to try to create a blockade. So okay, this was the suggested line. Knight to e2 was played instead of knight to f4 here by Parada. We have knight to e4. Also knight to e5 is very interesting. You see now how this knight can come into the game. After bishop to g2, we could go knight to g4. This is already very dangerous. You see the knights are dancing around white's king. This bishop's activity is perfectly fine. We're attacking still this isolated pawn on d5. So it's also a very interesting idea. But instead of this move knight to e5, here Zvjaginsev tried knight to e4. It's still of course playable, because you don't want to give up of course your bishop here. After bishop to e4, rook to e4 will happen. You have several light score problems. You have already weakened your light scores with the move g3, so you don't want to give up your light score bishop when you already played the move g3. So that's why here in the game Parada played queen to c2, attacks further the knight, and knight to f6. You see how Zvjaginsev remaneuvered his knight. Still he has a powerful control of the e4 square. We have knight to g2. Knight to f4, if happens, then we can simply take bishop to f4, bishop to f4, and now queen to d7. Still, the battle is around the square here, d5. This pawn is very, very weak, so it's maybe a better line for white, but still, I don't like this isolated pawn. Still, the evaluation is much, much better for white here. In the game, knight to g2 was played instead of bishop to f4, and here Zvjaginsev plays the move queen to d7. Bishop to f8 is basically here the suggested move because of this particular line. After bishop to f8, we have now the opportunity to play knight to g5. We have deflected the bishop here now from h6, and now if you play knight to h4, again we take out first here because this knight was very weird here on g2, so knight to f3. Now after knight to f3 we could take out now the bishop on f8, and still you see black is again much better. We have a great attack against this weak d5 pawn, and even if you manage to push the pawn further on d6 like you want to do because you have this isolated pawn, then you're basically opening the long diagonal for the light square bishop. So as I said, maybe bishop to f8 slightly better, but still Zvjaginsev is trying to attack the position with the move queen to d7. He's trying now to sneak in with the queen further to the king side. Now after move knight to e3, we have rook to d8, bishop to g2, and now a very cool move here by Zvjaginsev, knight takes f2. This is really brilliant, and it's not a mistake, it's not an inaccuracy, it's not a blunder here by Zvjaginsev. Great sharp tactical shot here. Knight takes f2 is basically breaking the position, and the cool part is that basically this knight on e3 is protected. You see the bishop is perfectly fine here. In the game, what to do? King to f2 was played, and now Zvjaginsev continued the attack with a beautiful rook sacrifice. Rook takes e3. We have now bishop to e3, but now the knight comes very actively into the game, and there are now several ways how to proceed here. Basically, whatever you do, black is much better. This was a great tactical shot by Zvjaginsev. After the move knight to g4, you could go king to g1, but I think the easiest way to win this game is simply to play knight to e3. We have queen to d3, and now you could support here with rook to e8. Then maybe b3 would be the opportunity, and still you lose the rook on d1. If you move somewhere the rook here, maybe instead of this b3, if you move the rook to e1, still I think we can simply take out the bishop. We can also play c4. This is already very dangerous, so as I said, but the easiest way, as I said, here is simply to take, and then after the fork simply to take out the rook, knight takes d1, rook to d1, and we're continuing now the game with a great bishop pair here against white's king. So it's a much better position for black. So here in the game, king to f3 was played by Parada, so he didn't want to go here king to g1, lose this bishop. He tried to hang on to this bishop. Knight to h2 played by Zvjaginsev. We have king to f2, and what Parada probably hoped for here is a draw. It's a perpetual after knight to g4. Again, he tried king to f3. Now one of the best ways is to proceed here rook to e8 or queen to e6. In the game, Zvjaginsev tried here this idea queen to e6, but rook to e8 is actually the suggested lie by the engine, but nothing wrong also with queen to e6. The position is much better for black. Rook to e8. Now you could try bishop to c1, but now still bishop to c7 is very dangerous. We're now attacking the weak pawn on d5. Even if you try somehow knight to f4 to defend this pawn, you get g5. Knight to h5 could happen, but now f5, and you see now if you for instance take out this pawn, the main issue is this move, bishop to d5, here rook to d5, queen to d5, and you're checkmated. So it's not possible to defend this position anymore. Really wild stuff. Even if you try here instead of this move bishop to c1, if you try bishop to g1, nothing dramatically changed. Then we have this idea queen to e6. You cannot of course take the queen because of the pin, and now after rook to e1 we could try bishop to d5, and again you're simply lost. Even if you hang on to this pawn with knight to f4, then we can play knight to h2. This is really great. If you try bishop to h2, you get deflected here. The bishop is not covering anymore the e3 square, so now queen to e3, king to g4, now bishop to c8. Very nice check, and that's basically the main attacking motif here of Zvjaginsev. bishop to c8, very nice tactical shot. You could maybe cover, but you're just prolonging the game. Of course, we simply take out with the rook and then threatening also this covered attack by the bishop. So really, really wild stuff. Instead of this move, you don't have to take out, of course, the knight. You could also try again king to f2, but then you get queen to e3 and it's checkmate. So you see the possibilities here after the move rook to e8. But in the game, Zvjaginsev, as we said, played the move queen to e6. He's threatening now this move bishop to d5. In the game, bishop to f4 was played. And now rook to e8, attacking further the e file. In the game, queen to c4 was played, and now it's time for you to pause the video and try to see now the best move here for black. So pause the video, take your time. It's really a wild move that Zvjaginsev played here. Take your time. Maybe you cannot see immediately, but it's a great tactic. It's such a beautiful tactical shot. That's why I really decided to show you this game. It's really an attacking brilliancy. So after the move queen to c4, here, our fellow Zvjaginsev found in Immortal, really brutal in Immortal queen sacrifice, queen to e3. There's nothing much that can be done. Of course, if you don't react, if you play something like king to g4, then again, you get this idea bishop to c8 and you get checkmated. So in the game here, Parada tried bishop takes e3. We have rook to e3. Now you have to take out the knight, but now again, bishop to c8. Here, king to g5 was played, now h6. Whenever you have this king hunt, you want to decoy your opponent's king towards your side. So you want to basically get him towards your king. That's the main rule of the king hunt. So now after move h6, here king to h6 was played, and now rook to e5. And in this position, Parada resigned. Because first of all, we're threatening now two checkmates here. The checkmate on h5, but also the checkmate here on f8. There's nothing that can be done. So here you could try queen to f4, maybe preventing something, or queen to h4, but then you get bishop to f8. It's checkmate. So it's a double threat. Beautiful queen sacrifice by Zvjaginsev. Let's go back to the highlights, I think, of this game. So here, as we said, you see, you played knight to e4, then you retreated knight to c3, and then black has immediately the opportunity to play c5 d5. Okay, you have this pawn, it's an isolated pawn. Now bishop to h6. That's the cool part here. Knight to e2. You see black is activating pieces, getting them on the best squares. You're weakening already the light squares, so you don't want to take, of course. Bishop to e4, rook to e4. Then still this long diagonal of the light square bishop is something that worries you through the whole game. So queen to c2, knight to f6, improving. And now when the time came here, knight to f2, great tactical shot. Rook to e3. Bishop to e3, now the fork. First we take the pawn. As I said, in this particular scenario, even if you try king to g1, the easiest way is simply knight to e3 followed with knight takes d1. Still you're winning here, but in the game king to f3. Now the queen comes into the game, the battery, and now queen to e3. Really brilliant stuff. Rook to e3, bishop to c8, h6, and now rook to e5. In this position, as we said, Parada resigned. So I hope you liked the game. I really enjoyed it a lot when I saw it. I saw it now for the first day today. I googled something and then I found this brilliancy. I hope you like it. As I said, like I did, this was a brilliant attack by Zvjaginsev. Really immortal chess game and deserves really to be on our list, the best chess games of all time. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. Meanwhile, you can watch my other best chess games of all times. Here's the link of my playlist with more than 100 games from the past. Please check them out. They're really beautiful, great attacking brilliancies by many players. And if you want to see maybe even more aggressive games, check out my best chess games played by computers with some Alpha Zero, Lila Zero, Stockfish, Komodo Dragon games. They are also, of course, really brilliant with some immortal queen sacrifices, rook sacrifices, decoy deflections, and all of these beautiful elements that we love to see in the chess game. And of course, if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.